Good morning. It's good to see everyone here this morning. We are in Matthew, the 22nd chapter this morning. Matthew, the 22nd chapter. Starting there in verse 1. Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son. And he sent out his slaves to call those who had been invited to the wedding feast, and they were unwilling to come. And again he sent out other slaves, saying, 'Tell those who have been invited, behold, I have prepared my dinner, my oxen and fattened livestock, and all butchered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding feast.' But they paid no attention and went their way, one to his own farm, another to his business. And the rest seized his slaves and mistreated them and killed them. But the king was enraged, and he sent his armies and destroyed those murderers and set their city on fire. Then he said to his slaves, 'The wedding is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. Go therefore to the main highways, and as many as you can find there, invite them to the wedding feast.' Those slaves went out into the streets and gathered together all they found, both evil and good. And the wedding hall was filled with dinner guests. But when the king came in and looked over the dinner guests, he saw a man there who was not dressed in wedding clothes. And he said to him, 'Friend, how did you come in here without wedding clothes?' And the man was speechless. Then the king said to the servants, 'Bind him hand and foot, and throw him into the outer darkness, and that place where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'" Okay, let's kind of go back over here to the beginning of this parable. I know some may say, well, that's maybe talking about one thing and then another, but let's look at there. We can all understand this parable that he's trying to relate to. Here, this king has a son that's getting married. And they was throwing a big wedding feast, a big party. And they had invited a lot of guests. But none of them showed. Yes. Mm-hmm. The question is here, you can look at this as the kingdom of heaven is what he's comparing this to. Okay? Who are the invited guests that did not come? The Jews. This was set out to begin with the Jews first. Okay? They were told first. It was prophesied to them first. But it's amazing when it said they paid no attention and went their way. Is that not what the Jewish people as a whole did? Not all, but as a whole, they did that. They paid no attention. Matter of fact, the leadership of the Jews, what were their intent to do? To get rid of Jesus. He was causing problems. He was causing problems. So you look at that when it says they paid no attention there in verse 5 and they went their way. One went to his farm, another went to his business. Now look at this part right here. Verse 6. And the rest seized his slaves and mistreated them and killed them. Who is he talking about there? Who was, huh? Himself? But he could be talking about the prophets of old, too. Yeah, yeah. Because you stop and think about the prophets and what all they went through. They all died. They all died. They were very mistreated. A lot of them was scared for their lives. They had to live out in the wilderness, a lot of them did. Continuing on. So, after those people rejected, did not come to the wedding feast, because those folks just wasn't worthy. Therefore, go out into the highways and find as many there and invite them to the wedding feast. You can understand what's going on here. That means what did he do to the word? This means a lot to you and I, doesn't it? This means a lot to you and I, because we're into this second category, the Gentiles. Those slaves went out into the streets and gathered together all they could find. Look at this. Both evil and good. And the wedding hall was filled with their guests. Why do you think he pointed that out? Evil and good.
We're not to prejudge.
All sin. Not to judge. Continue on. The wedding hall was filled with dinner guests. But when the king came in and looked over the guests, he saw a man there who was not dressed in wedding clothes. Who's he talking about there? The one that is not dressed in wedding clothes.
They must have had a certain law then, king, that the man had to wear the wedding clothes too, or whatever it is.
Let's continue on. And he said to him, "Friend, how did you get in here without wedding clothes?" Then the king said to the servants, "Bind him hand and foot, and throw him into outer darkness, the place where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth."
Well, that's talking, that referring to, if you don't serve Christ, like the judge, then you don't go.
Okay? But who is he talking about, this one?
He was still clothed in sin,
Okay?
because when we're washed in the blood, we're new.
Okay?
So that the evil people were.
I've heard commentaries that say that can even resort back to the devil being thrown. I mean, there's different thoughts on that. So there's not a definite answer that I can give you. But we know that
She said he
he had not, that's right.
for the feast.
That's right. He had not prepared. And look at this. I mean, he told us, I'm sorry.
He says to get both evil and good.
That's right. Yeah.
So, you know, had to be more than one not dressed.
But this one evidently was one that he's going to make an example out of.
Or
Awesome. Or, yeah.
the other evils did change their clothing, so to speak. They
That's
did
true.
put on
They
Christ.
got right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's true.
I know. It's probably why it's a parable. Huh?
That's it. That's it. Because on the commentary I read, there was 2 or 3 different ways you could look at this. So it wasn't a definite answer. But we do know, where was he thrown to?
Well,
Where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. Place we don't want to be. Now look at this verse 14. I'm waiting for Leland to tell me what this one means. For many are called, but few are chosen. What do you think he's referring to there? Now, remember, we're talking about the kingdom of God. It says the kingdom of God, what? may be compared to. So who is he talking? What's he talking about there when it says many are called, but few are chosen?
Everybody's called.
Everybody's called. Everybody has that opportunity, don't we? That's right. You look at this in comparison. I don't know how many million people there are in the world. Fill in the blanks. Compare that to Christians. Is that not a few?
Well, look at the ark. When the ark was built, all of
The world.
all of the known mankind,
That's right.
and only how many
Only
were
8
saved in
souls,
the
yeah.
ark?
That, it, when you can't, you know, that you hear people trying to name numbers and all this stuff. Yeah.
Bill, in Second Peter 1:10, says, wherefore, we rather give diligence to make your calling and election sure, for if you don't do these things, you fall.
It's true. Mine has over in the sideline there, it says, many are invited instead of called. Everybody has that opportunity. Now, whether you accept that opportunity or that invitation is up to you.
Well, each one of the guests have the right to choose to go to the wedding or not,
It's true.
and they chose not to.
And they did. That's right.
So it takes action.
It takes action. You can bring it right here. It takes action on our part. God has done his part. The invitation's there. It's up to us whether we accept it or not. Okay? And whether we show up. You can look at this any way you want to. It's our responsibility to take that upon us. Okay? Verse 15 now. Then the Pharisees went and plotted together how they might trap him in what he said. Now let's stop back. When he said what he said there about the wedding feast, what was he telling the leadership or the Pharisees? They knew they were the ones that didn't show up. They knew that. So here they went and plotted together how they might trap him. The only way they could see right now that they could take advantage of Jesus is to humiliate him in front of the people. That's the reason they was trying to trap him in an answer that he gave. But let's continue the thought. Verse 16 now. And they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are truthful and you teach the way of God in truth and defer to no one. For you are not partial to any. Boy, are they buttering him up right now. Remember, these are the people that's plotted against them. And they came to him and landed on pretty thick, we might say. Okay, teacher, we know that you're truthful and teach the way of God and all that. My question is, why aren't you paying attention? But you're not partial to any. Verse 17. Tell us then, what do you think? Is it lawful to give a poll tax to Caesar or not? Verse 18. I mean, here we're getting to this time of the year. Taxes is on our mind. Is it lawful to pay taxes? Is it lawful for them to pay the poll tax at this time? Let's continue the thought in verse 18. But Jesus perceived their malice and said, Why are you testing me, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the poll tax. Now you think about what he's just done here. The first things that he done sees what they're doing. He done knows they're trying to test him. Coming up with some kind of question like that. He said a pretty strong term here, and I don't know how they took it. When you're called a hypocrite, that's not a good thing. What does a hypocrite mean? Anybody know? That's when you say something and then you do something else. That's when you pretend to be a Christian, but you're not. Okay? Look here. So now he's saying, show me the coin used for a poll tax. And they brought him a denarius. I know everybody's probably got on the sidelines. That's a day's wages.
What's a poll tax?
That's a tax they had to pay there in Judah. Just because Caesar was Caesar.
But it was without reference to what they owned or.
It wasn't
how
an
much
income tax. It
right.
was a flat tax,
So
we
I
might
can
say.
see where people
Yeah.
would think a poll tax was unfair.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I'm poor, I gotta pay the same thing as somebody else.
it's just a flat tax. That's right.
King James Version used tribute,
Tribute, okay?
yeah, tribute money.
But you know, you look at that. How many of us today would like to pay a tax that cost us a whole day's work? Man, that's unfair, isn't it? That's how we'd look at it. And now in verse 20. And he said to them, whose likeness is and inscription is this? On the coin. They said to him, Caesar's. Then he said to them, then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. So what kind of answer did Jesus give them? That's the answer you could come up with. This revolves back to us today, guys. I know we don't like paying taxes. Man, put me in front of the list. I do not like that. But when it says render Caesar's, what is Caesar's? What does that mean?
Pay it.
Pay what you owe. Pay what you owe. Then also look at the next part though. After we can understand we have to pay our taxes, whatever we owe. The next is, and to God the things that are God's. What does that mean? What does that mean?
What's not Caesar's is God's.
Well, what does he mean though? To God the things that are God's. All right, we're paying tribute to Caesar. We pay that. So what do we need to pay God?
Hey, Bill,
What's for both.
because of Christ's death, we should look and see how much we owe God. And be happy to pay it back God.
Well, he's including everything,
There you
not
go.
just money. He's
Everything.
not just asking for money. You give God your time, you give him your loyalty, your dedication. It's everything else.
Let's just think about it in this way. Does God want second best?
You wouldn't accept it from town.
We have to remember, we may have these lined up wrong. We're supposed to give God whatever first, then take care of the rest.
Well, and it's possible he's doing it in that order to remind us that everything else, like Pat said, everything else belongs to him.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
once you've taken care of Caesar, then
It's mine.
that he gives us enough examples to know that this is not just money. Because again, I go back to the widow's mite. Such a small amount, but it was all she had. and he
In
said
relationship,
worth
it was
more.
everything she had. Yeah.
It was worth more than anybody else had given.
And the thing about it is, when you look at it in that aspect, and that's what Jesus brought out when talking about the lady with the money. She gave all she had. How many of us today give all that we have? I'm not talking about just money. That's not what I'm referring to. I'm talking about your time, your energy. Do you see what I'm saying? Your worship.
And that could be the reason he put it somewhere.
Could be.
Well, it's- In a lot of ways, it's really not second, because Caesar
Right.
created the coin, God created it.
That's right.
Exactly.
And that's the reason he brought out that. What is on the coin? What is that?
Right.
So that's, you give that to Caesar.
Plus, he was trying to answer what people were trying to drag him.
Yeah. Now, after Jesus had said these things, look at verse 22. After he had just told them, give to Caesar whatever is Caesar's, and to God what's God's. And hearing this, they were amazed, and leaving him, they went their way. Think about what this has just said here. These are the ones that have been plotting against Jesus. Did it say they left angry? Did it say what?
Amazed.
Amazed.
They thought he would say,
Oh, they thought,
give to Caesar.
yeah.
You probably said it that way because more than likely the Romans would have been.
Oh,
listening,
yeah.
And it wasn't his time, because he would have been arrested if he would have said it that way.
Let me tell you this, probably the Roman soldiers was there.
Yeah. So they would have arrested him and that would have.
More than likely, they're around. They may not have been right on top of it, but they were around knowing. And if he'd said something wrong, guess who would have tattled on them? Pharisees would have. No, it would. But my thing is, it says, hearing this, after he'd made these answers, they were amazed. How many of us today are amazed at anything? There's not very many things that amazes us today. The answer that he gave, because they thought they were going to get him. I got him. I got him. I got him. The answer that he gave was just spot on. They were amazed, and leaving him, they went their way.
It's a perfect answer.
Yeah, the perfect answer. They couldn't dispute. They couldn't dispute it. Couldn't dispute it. Now in verse 23, we're just almost out of time, but we'll read a verse here. On that day, some Sadducees, who said there is no resurrection, came to Jesus, questioning him, asking, Teacher, Moses said, if a man dies having no children, his brother, as next of kin, shall marry his wife and raise up children for his brother. All right. That was prophesied back, that was told back years ago. But the thing that we need to remember, we've just been talking about the Pharisees. These are the Sadducees. What's the difference in the two? The Pharisees believed in resurrection. Sadducees did not. They believed you're like Roman. When you're dead, you're dead all over. That's it. When you die, it's it. There is no time. Okay? So, you can imagine the two groups did not get along very well. I'll just put it that way. Okay? Because they had definite disputes in their beliefs. So they came to him, questioning him, asking, Teacher, Moses said this. What does that tell you about the Sadducees?
Still going under the Old Testament.
They knew what the law said, didn't they? They knew. Of course, we understand this, and we're not going to get into it today because this could raise questions. But we're going to stop right there, and we'll end class, and we will take up right here next week. Thank you for your comments this morning.